Hello everyone, this is Daughter Darkness, and today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 Doctor Who episodes of the new series, that is, any episode that's come since the show's revival in 2005. I'm only counting episodes of the main show, so no mini episodes, no spin-offs or anything like that count, but specials outside of the main series do count. I can be honest, it was quite difficult narrowing this down to 10, and that was really the biggest challenge, apart from ranking it, which means that obviously even the stuff lower down on this list, there's still stuff that I really like. And finally, I will be talking spoilers freely whenever I talk about this episode, so if I mention an episode that you've seen, you might be best off skipping that section and just moving on to the next one. But anyway, let's get started. In number 10, Flatline, written by Jamie Mathieson. This is the entry on the list that's really just it's just a really fun episode. It's a really good one to watch, and I could watch it over and over. It's got a creative villain, and it works basically like a standard Doctor Who story of Doctor comes in, saves people and stops some monster, but it obviously has the twist because the Doctor's stuck and he can't be the Doctor. And he's replaced by everyone's favourite, Clara.
Never did tell me your name.
No time to fraternize. Come on, get rid of him.
I'm the Doctor.
Don't you dare.
Dr. Oswald.
You can call me Clara.
I'm Riggsy. So, what are you a doctor of?
Of lies.
Well, I'm usually
Quite vague about that. I think I just picked the title because it makes me sound important.
I know that she's generally not loved that much by a lot of people. I don't mind her so much, and I think in this episode, and the one immediately before it, Mummy on the Orient Express, which very narrowly missed out on appearing in this list, I think this is where she's at her best, as she's basically forced to become the Doctor after she's just had to learn how to understand the way that he acts. There is some humour in this episode, of course, with the whole, tiny TARDIS and the Doctor stuck in there and he's still big and all that kind of stuff. But despite that, it does do a good job of, building tension. The monster is genuinely intimidating and genuinely threatening. And I kind of like the way that Clara, filling the Doctor's shoes with him in her ear all the time, that she's trying to understand it. She's kind of going, no, this is not necessarily a bad thing. This might just not understand the way we do things. But then they find out, of course, that it is evil, and it does just want to destroy. And that's when the Doctor steps in and stops them. And I think there's this nice moment at the end, of course, the whole thing of, was I good? You were fantastic as the Doctor, but there's nothing good about it. I think it just works perfectly within Series 8, which is one which was a bit of a mixed bag in terms of episodes. This is really the highlight, so Flatline gets onto my list at number 10. In number 9, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, written by Russell T Davies, and as a point now, two-parters are counted as a single story because, well, they're just effectively an extended episode with a cliffhanger in the middle. So this one in particular is, apart from another episode that I'll mention later on, probably the biggest sort of event piece in the show since its revival, because it acted as the first major crossover episode. We had people from obviously Doctor Who, but also main characters from Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures all appearing in the same episode. It effectively brought a lot of the story arcs from the Russell T Davies era of both Doctor Who and the wider universe of the show. It brought everything all together for this one sort of climactic battle. It was nice to see all these different characters interacting with each other as well. And I think it's impressive. There is so much going on in this episode. There is all this stuff, there's two Doctors, there's Daleks, there's Davros, and yet, it does a pretty good job of balancing everything. Everyone's on form here. I think all of the characters are good. Everyone gets their own time in the spotlight. Everyone gets to contribute to defeating the Daleks and saving the Earth. And of course it comes together with the tragic end of Donna as the companion, probably the saddest exit of a companion in the whole series. If there's one issue with this episode, it's the Daleks. they're kind of just there. It's like they needed a big world-ending threat, so they just went, okay, well, we like the Daleks, we've got a load of models, let's use them. They're pretty much the most afterthoughty thing there. And while Julian Bleach, I think, is great as Davros, and would be really good as him in his next appearance, in this one, he's relegated to just sort of sitting in the background and screaming. So, the villain side of things, not so good, but the hero side of things, so many elements, but all brought together quite well, and this worked as a really good finale to Series 4. So, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End gets onto my list at number 9. In number 8, we have the earliest entry on this list. From Series 1, Episode 6, it's Dalek, written by Rob Shearman. I just talked about a bad use of the Daleks in the previous episode that was saved by everything else. Well, if you want to know how to use the Daleks well, it's here. It is so good. This is the best use of the Daleks in the modern era of the show, without question. They feel so intimidating here because there's just one of them. One thing that you can't defeat that's just ruthlessly killing things is a lot more scary than an army. And really a big part of it is the way the Doctor reacts to the Dalek. That he is horrified that this thing is still alive. Just looking at it kind of makes him feel sick, and he nearly tries to murder it on multiple occasions.
I've come to help. I'm the Doctor. Impossible.
The Doctor! Exterminate! Exterminate!
Before the Dalek eventually grows a bit of a conscience and decides to kill itself rather than become sort of nice. It's just a really, really tight story. It is kind of based under siege, a typical Doctor Who thing, but it uses the Daleks so well that it's just great, and people need to learn from this episode. He reinvented a classic villain that had basically become a pop culture icon. It's kind of like the thing with horror villains. Eventually, they're just around so much that they lose how scary they are. Well, that has happened certainly in Doctor Who since this episode, but this was the one that really brought them back and made them into what they should be. So Dalek gets onto my list at number 8. In number 7, Human Nature and the Family of Blood, written by Paul Cornell. This is of course based on an old 7th Doctor novel by the same author that I haven't actually read, so for me I can only judge this episode on its own merits, and it is really, really good. It's a really interesting idea to make the Doctor stop being the Doctor. He's a human who has no idea what's going on, and his companion's the one with all the knowledge. In terms of the companion, this is where Martha shines. This, and then the finale of Series 3, Martha is great. In this episode, the Doctor is able to rely on her, and she is able to protect him, as he is completely defenseless. And I think this idea of the villain, it's something that the Doctor could defeat easily. The Doctor is so much stronger than them, but he wants to be kind to them because they've only got a short lifespan. So he finds it better to let them live out their lives rather than just stop them and kill them. But then at the end, after everything they've done, plus his memories of John Smith and everything that he had lost, then he kind of goes off the rails a bit. And this is where it probably works more as a 7th Doctor story, because he is quite ruthless with how he deals with them. He gives them immortal life by making them eternally suffering.
It seems to be indicating you've got energy feedback all the way through the retro stabilizers feeding back into the primary heat converters. Oh! Because if there's one thing you shouldn't have done, you shouldn't have let me press all those buttons. But, in fairness, I will give you one word of advice. Run.
But although that maybe works better for the 7th Doctor, it's still done really well here. So it's just a really, really solid story, really well written, and it's one with a little bit of a twist on the normal formula, which is something that I like. So it's a really good story, and it gets onto my list at number 7. In number 6, we have another two-parter. It's The Empty Child / The Doctor Dances, written by, of course, Stephen Moffat. This was his first contribution to Doctor Who, and it's his first contribution to this list. In both cases, by no means the last. It's just a really good and quite chilling horror story, and it's got a nice plot behind it as well. It is scary, and it's got a good story, which is a rare thing to find together. but it's something that Stephen Moffat does quite well. It's a good use of real imagery in a horror setting, which I think is something that's always a little bit more unsettling. It's fantasy, but it's based on something real. The gas mask design in World War II, when you look at it now, it does look kind of scary, and children always seem to have a way of making things look a little bit more scary than they would be normally. So in terms of building atmosphere and the threat in this episode being just a boy who has lost his mother and has been corrupted by some confused medical technology, it's just so good. And it of course had the added claim to fame of introducing Captain Jack Harkness, who's one of the most popular characters of the modern era, and he does have a really good start here as he inadvertently causes everything that's going wrong. The everybody lives moment at the end was really nice here.
You want moves, Rose? I'll give you moves. Everybody lives, Rose. Just this once! Everybody lives!
It is a bit of a shame that Stephen Moffat would then go on to use Everybody Lives as the main slogan for his time at Doctor Who, but it does work so well here because we've seen how damaged the Ninth Doctor is, that this moment to celebrate is so special to him. And that's why The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances gets onto my list at number 6. In number 5, we're staying with Series 1, but moving right to the end of Series 1, and we have Bad Wolf / Parting of the Ways, which was of course written by Russell T Davies. I mentioned in the last video that Series 1 is still my favourite, and this, as well as the other episodes I've mentioned, is a big part of why it is so good, because the finale just brings everything together in such a satisfying way. It also helps, for a bit of context, back in 2005, I didn't really know what Doctor Who was, but then I heard my dad say that he liked watching it, so I watched it with him one Saturday, and the Saturday that I watched it was Bad Wolf. So these two episodes were the first 2 episodes of Doctor Who I ever saw, and they're the reason that I got into the show in the first place. The reality show parodies at the start, well yeah, they haven't really aged that well, have they? But honestly, I think they're harmless enough. I don't really mind them. I didn't mind them as a 9-year-old back in 2005, and I don't really mind them now. Plus, the idea of Daleks sort of sitting in a boardroom as TV executives kind of worrying about ratings and all that kind of stuff is kind of amusing. Speaking of Daleks, I mentioned before that Dalek is the best use of them in the modern era. Well, this is the best use of multiple Daleks in one go. This is where the Dalek army is actually threatening. Dalek was the individual, more claustrophobic, single Dalek that was the problem. Now we've got a huge army of them. The Emperor's appearance as well acts in this escalation of things, and I really like Rose's line here, when she says, "We could barely even beat one," which just makes it feel so hopeless, which this episode does so well. There is a feeling of hopelessness, especially in the second part of it. There's no way around it.
Because this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna rescue her. I'm gonna save Rose Tyler from the middle of the Dalek fleet, and then I'm gonna save the Earth, and then, just to finish off, I'm gonna wipe every last stinking Dalek out of the sky!
But you have no weapons, no defenses, no plan!
Yeah. And doesn't that scare you to death?
Of course, the ending, the Deus Ex Machina Bad Wolf thing, I think the series built up enough with the whole Bad Wolf thing before that whole "we're gonna hide a word in every episode of the series and then people will be excited for the finale," before that thing got tired. It worked really well here, and I think it built up enough that we were kind of expecting Bad Wolf to be the villain or something related to the Daleks, even the Doctor was, but then it's the thing that saves him and destroys the Daleks. So I think this is definitely the best modern regeneration story, because it works the way they're supposed to. Regeneration is the consequence of the story. It's not the story the way it is in all the other regeneration episodes of the modern era. So it just works as the perfect finale, and it is one of those episodes I could just watch over and over again. So Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways gets onto my list at number 5. In number 4 we have the final finale on my list, and the most recent series finale that we've had, and that's World Enough and Time and The Doctor Falls, written by Stephen Moffat. These are obviously very recent episodes, and it's always surprising when something so recent kind of breaks in this high in a top 10 list. But the thing is, it's just so great. I'm gonna kind of talk about them separately here, because while they are an indistinguishable two-parter, the story very clearly is just a single story. Tonally and everything, they are quite different. So, I'm just gonna talk about them separately for now. So, World Enough and Time, honestly, on its own, it could be competing for number 1. It is just so good. Everything just works so perfectly here. At their best, the Cybermen are by far the scariest and creepiest and best Doctor Who villain, because the concept is realistic. It's something that could actually happen. And this sort of body horror element of it is something that can't really be explored that much by the show because it's a family show. But this did about as good a job as it possibly could. I think the stuff here, like when the handlebars type thing was shown to Bill and the doctor person there said, "This isn't going to stop you feeling pain. This'll just make you stop caring." It actually gives reasons why the Cybermen are the way they are. People didn't want to live like this. They had no choice. If they didn't do this, they would die. And even though the reveals of the Master and the Cybermen were spoiled, of course, by trailers and all that sort of stuff, I was still on the edge of my seat throughout the whole episode. I knew it was the Cybermen, but I didn't know exactly how it was going to happen. The build-up to the Mondasian Cyberman appearing at the end, and everything that goes on with Bill, just makes this episode so gripping. It's a character that we've gotten to love throughout that whole series, and she's going through this horrible ordeal. And there's nothing that we can do about it, or anything the Doctor can do about it. He's too late to save her. And I think the "I waited for you" moment at the end is heartbreaking, honestly, and it was the perfect note to end it on.
Specifically, the genesis of the Cybermen. I waited for you.
As far as the Doctor Falls goes, I think it's just a really solid finale. It kind of like Parting of the Ways. It does the whole hopeless situation quite well. The Doctor hasn't really got a chance, but he's just fighting because he has nothing else to do. He has to do whatever he can to protect these people that he's with. And it has some really nice moments with him and Bill. And I think the choice to have Pearl Mackie actually being there despite being a Cyberman was really good, because it just makes it that much more real that this is happening to a person. It's not once they become a Cyberman they're gone. There's still a person in there going through this horrific thing. As much as the Master is pointless in this story, I think the way the Doctor pleads with him and Missy to stay and help him, I think it's one of the best Capaldi moments, and he's got quite a lot. And the moment when they kill each other, I think, was quite a fitting end for them. Not that it's going to be the end for the Master, they're obviously going to have another one. So, The Doctor Falls is a solid finale, but World Enough and Time is just brilliant. So it gets up on my list at number 4. In number 3, we have the go-to episode that appears on every single top countdown list of Doctor Who episodes of the modern era. It is Blink, of course, written by Stephen Moffat. You're going to see a theme developing here, by the way. It does deserve that place on everyone's list. Everything here is just written so tightly and so well. There isn't a bad moment, honestly. It's 45 minutes, but every bit of it is worth something. It doesn't feel like it's rushed, which a lot of 45-minute episodes do, because the writing and everything is just so tightly done that it doesn't need to have 2 episodes to be great. It's an episode, honestly, I recommend watching it even if you have no interest in Doctor Who. It's just a really good 45-minute sci-fi horror episode that's just so worth watching. The Weeping Angels as a concept are obviously great, and I think it's a shame that they were used again after this episode, because every time it seems like they've wanted to add extra powers to them, and they basically just become one of those other disposable villains that they throw in every now and then. Sally, as the protagonist, I think is really good as a one-off. Carey Mulligan does a really good job with her. The Doctor's role in the episode, I think, is clever. His whole role in the episode is just the video, and then appearing right at the end.
I don't know what stopped you talking, but I can guess. They're coming. The angels are coming for you, but listen. Your life could depend on this. Don't blink. Don't even blink. Blink and you're dead. They are fast, faster than you could believe. Don't turn your back. Don't look away, and don't blink. Good luck.
And in that way, it uses time in a cool way. And I like it when Doctor Who does that. It is a show about time travel. I think it makes sense that we should have episodes centred around time travel. And that's what this episode does so well, and Blink gets onto my list at number 3. In number 2, Day of the Doctor, written by Stephen Moffat. Well, it's the 50th anniversary special. It's probably the most hyped up episode of Doctor Who, certainly since I've started watching it. And it really lives up to the hype. It is just such a fun ride for me to watch, and I could watch it over and over. The 11th and 10th Doctors bounce off each other so well, and I almost think it's a shame that this is the only time they ever got to be together, which is obviously the way that Doctors work, but still, I just really enjoyed their interactions with each other, and John Hurt was, well, John Hurt in this episode. In terms of being a celebration of the show's 50 years, I mean, it isn't really, it's just doing its own thing and having a good time, but I don't mind that because it is such a good time. It culminates in one of the most satisfying moments ever.
It's delusional. The calculations alone would take hundreds of years.
Oh, hundreds and hundreds, but don't worry. I started a very long time ago.
Calling the War Council of Gallifrey. This is the Doctor.
You might say I've been doing this all my lives.
And as much as I think the Time War was a really good thing to start the series with when it came back, I think we're kind of done with it now. And I think it's fair to get rid of the baggage of the Doctor having killed his own people, so we can tell a different type of story now. So it's something that I'm okay with. And the cameo by Tom Baker at the end was great. Honestly, everything in here is just such a fun episode. And it gets onto my list at number 2. Okay, so before we get on to number 1, I just got a couple of honourable mentions to go through. The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. Midnight. The 11th Hour. Mummy on the Orient Express. Under the Lake Before the Flood. Okay, in number 1, it will be no surprise if you watched last week's video, it's Heaven Sent, written by Stephen Moffat. I mentioned last week that this is one of the best performances I've seen from certainly any Doctor, but really any actor, from Peter Capaldi in this episode, as he is on his own for the whole thing. As well as that, it creates a really good atmosphere right from the off. I think Rachel Talalay, the director of this episode and all of the Capaldi finales, she's just so good at what she does. Everything is shot in a way to just make you feel on your toes constantly, the way the Doctor has to be, as the way that he explains with the whole thing of, if I run from one end of this place to the other, I get 52 minutes to rest, and then the thing will catch up with me. He just has no chance to rest, as he's in this sort of custom-built torture chamber to get information out of it. And on top of that, he's struggling with losing a companion, which is something that we kind of had a little bit with David Tennant after losing Rose that I don't think works so well. In this episode, he's just completely grief-stricken that she has effectively been taken out from under him because of a mistake on her part. And he of course feels responsible, and he's going through all this at the same time. And again, there's a really great and satisfying scene at the end where the Doctor kind of gets to this wall of diamond or whatever it is.
Of course. The last square on the board. What else would it be? The TARDIS. One confession away.
And he can't break through. While it looks like he's in trouble, he instead hits the wall, and you're kind of like, what's going on here? And then you get stuck in a loop, and it's sort of like, okay, we're stuck again. But then you notice the Doctor's telling this story, and he's getting further and further along every time he tells it. And then the diamond wall's starting to go through. And it's the triumphant moment as the wall finally breaks, and he's able to get out, and reaches home, and arrives on Gallifrey, and all that kind of stuff at the end. It does of course set up Hellbent, which admittedly I don't hate quite as much as a lot of people. I can see the issues there, but I don't think it's like the worst episode of TV that's ever aired in the history of ever. I just think it was a slightly disappointing finale. but thankfully it feels like enough of a distinct story. This story is over, then Hellbent begins, rather than like World Enough and Time where the story was definitely one. So I don't have to put them together, which means this episode, which is my favourite episode of the modern era, is allowed to get onto my list at number 1. Okay, so that's it. That's my list, my top 10 episodes of the modern series of Doctor Who. Next week, I'll be doing the same thing but for the classic series, so please look forward to that, and please leave your ranking list in the comment section below the video. And while you're down there, please like this video if you did, and if you liked it, then check out my other videos and subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you for watching.